The bitter Antarctic wind howled across the research station as Dr. James Miller stared at his screen, brow furrowed in confusion. For the third time this week, his seismic readings made no sense. The data showed perfect geometric patterns deep beneath the ice, something that simply couldn't occur naturally. "Tom, come look at this," James called to his research partner. Tom Bennett crossed the small monitoring room, coffee mug in hand. "What have you got?" "These readings, they're the same as yesterday and the day before. Perfect symmetry, 3 miles down." James pointed to the screen where a clearly defined rectangular shape appeared in the sonar mapping. Tom leaned closer. "That can't be right. Must be equipment failure. I checked everything twice. This is real." Within hours, James had sent the readings to the Global Science Foundation headquarters. By the end of the day, their small research station was buzzing with activity as additional scientists and equipment arrived via emergency transport. 2 days later, as the world's news channels broadcast live footage, the first exploratory drill broke through the ice above the anomaly. What they found shocked everyone watching. "The surface appears to be metallic," reported Dr. Lisa Ward, the lead engineer on the drilling team. Her voice, transmitted from the bore camera, sounded tense with excitement. "It's not any alloy we recognize. The surface is smooth, with no signs of damage despite being buried under millions of tons of ice for, well, we don't know how long." The United Nations called an emergency session that same day. Within a week, the United Earth Excavation Initiative was formed, the first truly global scientific mission in human history. The UEEI brought together experts from every field and country. James found himself appointed as one of the lead researchers, alongside bright minds like Dr. Ward and military liaison Colonel Robert Greene. The world watched as massive equipment was transported to Antarctica, cutting-edge technology designed specifically to uncover whatever lay beneath the ice. Initial dating suggests the object predates human civilization, James explained during a press conference 1 month into the excavation. "We're looking at something that was buried here long before the first humans walked the Earth." The excavation proceeded carefully. As more of the structure was revealed, its scale became apparent. The rectangular shape was just one small section of something much, much larger. 3 months into the project, James and his team made their first entrance into the structure through what appeared to be an airlock of sorts. The interior was dark and silent, preserved perfectly in its icy tomb. "The air inside is breathable," noted Dr. Ward in surprise as her instruments analyzed the atmosphere. "How is that possible after all this time?" The team moved deeper into the structure, lights from their suits illuminating corridors that seemed designed for beings much taller than humans. The walls were lined with strange, swirling symbols that no linguist could immediately identify. "This architecture," James whispered, his voice filled with awe. "It's not random. Everything has a purpose." In a vast chamber deep within the structure, the team discovered what appeared to be control panels. They were arranged in a circular pattern around a central platform that glowed with a faint blue light, despite being powered down for what must have been thousands of years. "Some kind of command center," Colonel Greene suggested. James ran his hand over one of the panels, careful not to press anything. "I think it's more than that. These patterns here, they match astronomical charts. I think this is navigation." The realization struck the team simultaneously. "This isn't just some alien building," Dr. Ward said, her voice trembling. "This is a vessel, a ship." As if responding to their presence, the blue light at the center of the room pulsed once, brightening momentarily. A holographic display flickered to life, showing what was unmistakably an engine system of impossible scale and complexity. "My God," James whispered, "we haven't just found an alien artifact. We found their transport. And judging by the size of just this section," he looked around the massive room, trying to comprehend the scale, "this thing must be the size of a small country." The team stood in silence, the enormity of their discovery sinking in. Humanity was about to change forever. 5 years had passed since the initial discovery. What began as a small research station had transformed into a sprawling facility that housed over 3,000 scientists, engineers, and support staff. The excavation had revealed only a fraction of the colossal vessel, approximately 1/10 of its true size. But even that was enough to dwarf humanity's greatest achievements. James stood at the observation deck, gazing down at the exposed portion of the ship. Construction lights illuminated its sleek, dark surface, making it gleam like wet obsidian against the white Antarctic landscape. Still hard to believe, isn't it? Kate Reed joined him at the railing. As the lead engineer on the project, she had spent countless hours trying to understand the ship's systems. James nodded. 5 years, and we've barely scratched the surface. Kate handed him a tablet displaying her latest findings. We've made progress with the power systems. There seems to be a network of conduits running throughout the structure. They're dormant, but intact. Any idea what powers them? Nothing we understand yet, Kate admitted. The technology is so far beyond us that we're basically cavemen examining a smartphone. Later that day, James and Kate descended into the heart of the ship, to a chamber they had nicknamed the Bridge. It was their 300th visit to this particular section, but they approached every examination with fresh eyes, hoping to notice something new. I want to try something, Kate said, approaching one of the control panels. Over the years, they had learned that the ship responded to specific touch patterns. Nothing major had been activated yet, but small systems occasionally flickered to life, offering tantalizing glimpses into the vessel's capabilities. Kate placed her palm against a circular indentation in the panel. This configuration is different from the others. The symbols around it suggest some kind of communication function. Be careful, James cautioned, though his voice betrayed his excitement. Kate pressed her hand firmly against the panel. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, the familiar blue light beneath the surface grew brighter, and the panel warmed beneath her touch. A low hum filled the chamber, building in intensity until the floor beneath them vibrated. James grabbed the edge of a console to steady himself. Should I stop? Kate asked, eyes wide. Before James could answer, a brilliant beam of light shot upward from the center of the room, piercing through the ice and rock above them, and continuing into the sky. Alarms blared throughout the research facility. Emergency protocols activated as scientists rushed to their stations, fearing the worst. What did you do? James shouted over the noise. I don't know. Kate remained frozen, her hand still on the panel as data streamed across its surface. The holographic display at the center of the bridge activated, showing the solar system. 6 points of light began to pulse. 1 on Mars, 1 on Venus, 1 on Europa, 1 on Titan, and 2 among the asteroid belt. It's a beacon, James whispered in awe. It's signaling to other ships. Within hours, telescopes across Earth confirmed what the hologram showed. 6 identical energy signatures had appeared throughout the solar system, each emanating from bodies where humans had established colonies or research stations. In the Mars colony, panicked reports described a massive structure rising from beneath the Valles Marineris. On Venus, orbital stations tracked the movement of something enormous disturbing the planet's dense atmosphere. Similar reports came from Europa, Titan, and the asteroid belt. They've been here all along, Kate said, staring at the display, hidden in plain sight, under our feet, disguised as natural formations. Colonel Green burst into the bridge, face pale. The United Nations is in emergency session. Every major military is on high alert. What are we dealing with here? James couldn't tear his eyes from the holographic map. A fleet. We're dealing with a fleet of ships, each one the size of a small planet. And we just woke them up. But why? Kate asked. Why hide ships this size throughout our solar system? As if responding to her question, new symbols appeared on the display. They couldn't read the alien language, but the meaning was clear enough. These weren't merely vessels for travel. They were warships, and they had been waiting for millennia to be awakened. Thomas West had never imagined his linguistics degree would lead him here. Standing in what they now called the library, a massive chamber filled with crystalline data storage units, he felt both overwhelmed and exhilarated. 6 months had passed since the awakening of the beacons, and the world existed in a state of uneasy tension. "Any progress today?" James asked, joining Thomas at one of the console stations. Thomas ran a hand through his disheveled hair. "Some. The AI translation matrix is finally starting to recognize patterns." He gestured to the screens where symbols flowed in endless streams. "These aren't just words. They're concepts. Each symbol contains layers of meaning." The team had assembled the world's most powerful artificial intelligence system specifically to decode the alien language. What would have taken humans generations to translate was slowly yielding results after months of computational analysis. "Look at this," Thomas said, highlighting a recurring sequence. "This appears in almost every section we've examined. We think it translates roughly to the architects." "The architects," James repeated. "The beings who built these ships." Thomas nodded. "Based on what we've decoded so far, they were an ancient race, far older than humanity." Kate entered the library, her footsteps echoing in the cavernous space. "The teams on Mars and Europa are reporting similar chambers in their vessels. The symbols match ours exactly." "A unified fleet," James mused. "But unified against what?" The answer came 3 days later. Thomas burst into the command center where James and Kate were reviewing structural diagrams. "We've got it." His eyes were wide with excitement and fear. The eye broke through a major section of text. "You need to see this now." On the main screen, Thomas displayed the translation. Asterisk, "The architects flee what cannot be fought. The void consumes all. These vessels, our final legacy, remain dormant until worthy inheritors arise. If you read these words, the threat returns. Prepare." Asterisk. Silence fell over the room as the implications sank in. "There's more," Thomas continued, his voice quieter now. "They left star maps." He pulled up a holographic display showing thousands of points of light scattered across multiple galaxies. Each point pulsed with the same signature as their 7 ships. "There are more of them out there," Kate whispered. "Thousands more. All hidden," James added. "All waiting." That evening, the core team gathered to discuss their findings. Military officials from 12 nations joined the meeting, their faces grim on the video screens. "So these architects were running from something they called the void," Colonel Green summarized. "And they left these ships as what? A warning? A gift?" "Both, I think," Thomas replied. "The text suggests they knew they couldn't survive, but hoped someone else might use their technology to succeed where they failed." Kate had been unusually quiet. Now she spoke up. "I found something today." She pulled up schematics on her tablet. "It looks like an activation sequence for the ship's propulsion system." The room erupted in heated debate. "We can't possibly consider activating these vessels," argued the Chinese military representative. "We have no idea what might happen." "But if this threat, this void, is real, we need to understand these ships fully," countered the European Union's science director. James studied the activation sequence on Kate's tablet. The pattern was elegant in its simplicity, a specific combination of touch points on the main bridge control panel. "There's something else you should know," Thomas added when the arguments died down. "According to the translations, these ships aren't just transportation. They're weapons, possibly the most powerful weapons ever created." Colonel Green leaned forward. "What kind of weapons?" Thomas looked uncomfortable. "The translation isn't clear, but from what we can gather, they somehow harness the energy of stars themselves." As the debate continued, James found himself staring at the star map. Something about the pattern of ships troubled him. They weren't randomly distributed. They formed a line, a boundary. Not just a fleet of ships, he realized, a defensive perimeter. And Earth was just inside its edge. The world changed the day the news broke. Governments could no longer keep the discovery secret, not when 7 massive alien vessels were awakening throughout the solar system. Public reaction ranged from religious fervor to panic. Some saw the ships as divine gifts, others as harbingers of doom. The United Nations Security Council remains deadlocked, announced the news anchor on the screen in James' office. While most nations support a cooperative approach to studying the vessels, several countries have declared the ships within their territories to be sovereign assets. James switched off the screen with a sigh. Humanity faced its greatest discovery, yet politics threatened to divide them when unity was most crucial. Kate entered without knocking, her face tense. "We have a problem. The North Nova Coalition is sending troops to secure the Europa ship." The North Nova Coalition, an alliance of wealthy corporations that had established independent colonies throughout the solar system, had been pushing for exclusive access to the alien technology for months. "They can't do that," James protested. "No single entity has claim to these vessels." "They disagree," Kate replied grimly. "Their transport ships launched 3 hours ago." Colonel Green called an emergency meeting. Representatives from 30 nations gathered virtually as he explained the situation. If the coalition gains control of even one ship, they could potentially activate technology we barely understand, the colonel said. "The risk is unacceptable." "What options do we have?" asked the Brazilian ambassador. "Limited," Colonel Green admitted. "Our presence on Europa is scientific, not military." The debate raged for hours. Some advocated for immediate military response, while others pushed for diplomatic solutions. Throughout it all, James remained troubled by a different concern: what might happen if the ships themselves responded to this human conflict? His fears proved prophetic. 3 days later, the coalition forces landed on Europa and moved to seize the research station. The confrontation turned violent when station security refused to surrender access codes to the vessel. In the Antarctic Command Center, alarms blared as sensors detected massive energy spikes from the buried ship. "What's happening?" James demanded as he rushed into the monitoring room. "Unknown," replied the lead technician. "But whatever it is, it started exactly when the coalition breached the Europa vessel's outer chamber." On the main display, security camera feeds showed coalition soldiers placing explosive charges on a sealed doorway within the Europa ship. The moment the charges detonated, a shockwave of blue energy swept through the corridor, immobilizing the intruders. Simultaneously, the Antarctic vessel began to vibrate. Deep groaning sounds echoed through its structure as systems dormant for millennia activated one after another. "Evacuation Protocol Alpha." Colonel Green's voice boomed over the facility speakers. "All personnel to emergency transport vessels immediately." The ground beneath the research station trembled violently. Ice cracked in massive sheets as the colossal ship began to rise. James, Kate, and Thomas ignored the evacuation orders, racing instead toward the bridge. They arrived breathless to find control panels illuminated and pulsing with energy. "The defensive systems activated automatically," Kate said, scanning the displays. "It's protecting itself, and by extension, the other ships." Outside, the scene was apocalyptic yet awe-inspiring. 3 miles of ice and rock that had covered the vessel for millennia shattered and fell away as the massive ship ascended. The research facility, built on the vessel's surface, tilted precariously. Emergency transports launched in all directions, carrying evacuating personnel to safety. From orbit, satellites captured footage that would soon be broadcast worldwide. A vessel the size of Ireland rising from Antarctica, water cascading from its gleaming surface as it breached the ocean and continued upward. Inside the bridge, James gripped a console for stability as the ship continued its ascent. "Where is it going?" Thomas asked, his voice barely audible over the rumbling. The answer appeared on the main holographic display, a preset course carrying the vessel into low Earth orbit. Within hours, the Antarctic ship hovered above Earth's atmosphere, its massive form casting a shadow over the southern hemisphere. Across the solar system, the other 6 vessels remained in place, but their systems had awakened, pulsing with the same energy signature. It's waiting, James realized as he studied the ship's systems. They're all waiting. For what? Kate asked. Instructions, James replied softly. Our instructions. The world held its breath as the Antarctic vessel hung silently above Earth. For 3 days, it remained motionless, its dark surface reflecting sunlight like a massive obsidian mirror. Then, without warning, it moved. Its changing position, reported the technician monitoring the ship's trajectory from the hastily established Earth Command Center. Colonel Alan Parker, newly appointed as military liaison to the ship research team, leaned forward to study the tracking display. Where's it headed? Nowhere dangerous, James replied, analyzing the data. It's adjusting its orbit to align with something. They soon had their answer. Across the solar system, the 6 other vessels began to rise from their resting places. The Mars ship emerged fully from the Valles Marineris, sending clouds of red dust billowing into the atmosphere. On Venus, the massive vessel pushed through the thick clouds, becoming visible to observers for the first time. The Europa and Titan ships broke through their icy coverings, while the 2 asteroid belt vessels separated themselves from the surrounding rocks. They're moving in formation, Kate said, watching the holographic display showing all 7 ships' movements, converging on a single point in space. Within hours, the 7 planet-sized vessels formed a perfect heptagon at the edge of Earth's orbit. Once in position, they began emitting synchronized energy pulses. It's like they're communicating, Thomas suggested, or perhaps performing some kind of system check after being dormant for so long. Colonel Parker wasn't satisfied with passive observation. We need to get on board the Mars ship. It's the closest to our Olympus Mons base, and we already have personnel in the area. Is that wise? James asked. The ships clearly have automated defense systems, which is precisely why we need to understand them better, Parker countered. If these ships truly face some cosmic threat, we need to know what we're dealing with. 2 days later, Parker led a mixed team of military and scientific personnel to board the Mars vessel. James remained on Earth, but stayed in constant communication with the team. The interior layout matches the Antarctic ship almost exactly, Parker reported as his team moved through the corridors. Same symbols, same technology. Head toward the central chamber, James instructed. If it follows the same design, you should find the command center there. As Parker's team approached the ship's core, they discovered something the Antarctic vessel lacked. We found a new section. Parker's voice crackled through the communication system. Massive hall with thousands of containers. They looked like capsules of some kind. The video feed from Parker's helmet camera showed rows upon rows of oval-shaped pods, each roughly 8 feet long. The pods were made of the same dark material as the ship's hull and emitted a faint blue glow from seams along their surfaces. They're cryogenic chambers, Kate realized, studying the feed. Or the alien equivalent. Are they occupied? James asked, his heart racing. Parker approached one of the pods. Its surface was partially transparent, revealing a tall, slender figure inside. The being's skin had a pale, almost translucent quality, with faint luminescent patterns visible beneath the surface. Its limbs were long and elegant, its head slightly elongated with no visible external ears or nose, just large, almond-shaped indentations where eyes would be. We found them, Parker whispered. The architects. Initial scans revealed thousands of pods throughout the ship, but only a few hundred contained preserved beings. Most remained empty, telling a sad story of a species on the brink of extinction. The ship's systems indicate most of these beings have been in suspended animation for over 50,000 years. Kate reported after analyzing the data Parker's team transmitted. One pod at the center of the chamber was different, larger and surrounded by what appeared to be monitoring equipment. Unlike the others, this pod's occupant showed signs of neural activity. This one's still alive, Parker reported. Fully alive, not just preserved. As Parker's team studied the pod, its surface suddenly became transparent, The being inside opened its eyes, deep, liquid orbs that seemed to contain swirling galaxies. It raised one 7-fingered hand and pressed it against the pod's interior. The pod hissed open. "It's awakening," Parker said, his voice filled with wonder and apprehension. "One of them is actually waking up." The being rose gracefully from the pod, towering over the humans at nearly 8 feet tall. It looked at them with ancient, knowing eyes. "Welcome," it said in perfect English, its voice resonating directly in their minds. "I am Elior, last navigator of the Architect fleet. I have waited a very long time for you." Elior stood before the assembled leaders of Earth in the United Nations General Assembly. 2 weeks had passed since the Architect's awakening, and the world still struggled to absorb the reality of his existence. At 8 feet tall, with luminescent skin that shifted colors subtly as he spoke, Elior commanded attention without effort. "We fled across galaxies," Elior explained, his voice resonating directly in the minds of all present. "The void pursued us relentlessly. They are not a species as you understand the concept. They are a hunger that gained consciousness." On the massive screen behind him, images appeared, stars collapsing into darkness, entire solar systems vanishing in waves of absolute nothingness. "The void consumes energy in all forms," Elior continued. "Stars, radiation, life itself. Where they pass, nothing remains." James sat in the front row alongside Kate, Thomas, and Colonel Parker. They had become the unofficial ambassadors between humanity and Elior, their connection to the ships giving them unique status. "How many of your people survived?" asked the Secretary General. 417 across all 7 vessels," Elior replied. "Once, we numbered in the billions. We were explorers and builders who created wonders across 1,000 worlds." His eyes dimmed slightly. "Now, we are merely witnesses to our civilization's end." "But you created these ships," Colonel Parker interjected. "Surely they can fight this enemy." Elior turned his gaze to Parker. "The ships were built for 2 purposes: to preserve what remained of our kind, and to serve as weapons of last resort. We scattered them across many galaxies, hiding them on suitable worlds, hoping that some might escape the void's notice." "Why didn't you use them to fight?" James asked. "We did," Elior replied simply. "We lost. The weapons require tremendous energy and coordination to deploy. In our final battle, we damaged the void but could not destroy it. Our remaining ships fled, carrying the survivors of our species." Kate leaned forward. "The ships in our solar system, they're part of a defensive line, aren't they?" Elior nodded. "Yes, the final line we established before our defeat. We hid them on worlds that showed potential for developing intelligent life, hoping that someday new allies might awaken them." The implications hung heavy in the air. Humanity had not discovered the ships by accident. They had been chosen as inheritors. "How long do we have?" the Chinese president asked. Elior turned to the display, which now showed a map of the Milky Way. A shadow moved at its edge, spreading slowly inward. "The beacon's activation was both blessing and curse," Elior said. "It awakened the fleet, but it also revealed our location, based on their previous movement patterns." He pointed to a section of the galaxy. 6 months until they reached the outer edges of your solar system." Panic rippled through the assembly. 6 months. The Russian premier stood up. "How can we possibly prepare in 6 months?" "By doing what my people could not," Elior replied. "Unite." The following weeks saw humanity mobilize on an unprecedented scale. Old conflicts were set aside as nations pooled resources and knowledge. The ships became centers of frantic activity as human scientists worked alongside the awakened architects to understand the vessel's technology. On the bridge of the Antarctic ship, now positioned above Earth's North Pole, James watched as Elior instructed human technicians. "Your species learns quickly," Elior observed. "Quicker than we anticipated." "We've had practice adapting to survive," James replied. "It's what humans do best." Ilyr's skin rippled with colors that James had come to recognize as the equivalent of a smile. Perhaps that is why the ships chose your world. Long-range sensors aboard the Venus vessel detected the first definitive signs of the void 3 months later. The images showed a region of space where stars simply vanished, replaced by perfect darkness that defied all attempts at measurement or analysis. In the Antarctic ship's command center, Earth's military leaders gathered around a tactical display. "Can we evacuate?" asked the American admiral. "Use the ships to carry our population away." "There is nowhere to run," Ilyar said quietly. "The void moves faster than our vessels, and even if we could escape, they would follow the energy signature. No, we must make our stand here." "With what?" Colonel Parker demanded. "You said your people tried to fight and failed." "We fought alone," Ilyar replied. "And we fought with fear. You bring new perspectives, new ideas." He gestured to the adapted weapons systems the human engineers had modified. "Already, you have improved our designs in ways we never considered." James studied the approaching darkness on the display. 6 planets, billions of lives, all of human history and achievement. Everything hung in the balance. "How long until they arrive?" he asked. 3 months, Ilyar answered. "We have 3 months to prepare for war." The final days before the void's arrival passed in a blur of activity. Earth's atmosphere glowed with constant shuttle traffic as the last preparations were made. The 7 ships had been fully activated, their ancient systems humming with energy as human innovations were integrated into architect technology. James stood on the bridge of the Antarctic vessel, which had been named Horizon by its human crew. Through the viewing portal, he could see Earth below, beautiful and fragile. "Still hard to believe it's been only a year since we found that first anomaly," Kate said, joining him at the window. "Harder to believe we're about to fight an enemy that destroyed an entire civilization," James replied. The bridge doors slid open as Colonel Parker and Thomas entered, followed by Ilyar. In the months of preparation, the 4 humans had been appointed as captains, each commanding one of the 7 ships alongside an architect navigator. James had remained with the Horizon, while Kate commanded the Mars vessel, Thomas the Venus ship, and Parker the Europa craft. The remaining 3 vessels were led by other specially trained humans. "The sensor network has detected movement at the edge of the system," Ilyar announced. "The void approaches." On the main display, images from deep space telescopes showed the horrifying reality. A wave of perfect darkness moving toward the solar system, stars blinking out as it passed. "All ships report ready status," Thomas said, checking his communications panel. "Fleet formation is holding." During the preparation months, they had used the ship's beacons to awaken more vessels throughout nearby star systems. 39 ships had responded, arriving to join the defense of Earth. They now formed a sphere around the solar system, their massive forms positioned strategically based on architect tactical data and human military strategy. "The activation sequence is prepared," Kate reported. "All ships show green status for primary weapon systems." The plan was both simple and desperate. The combined fleet would channel the energy of the sun itself, creating a network of destructive force that, in theory, could damage the void enough to force it to retreat. "The shield systems are operational," James added. In the months of preparation, human engineers had developed an adaptation of the ship's defensive capabilities, a modification that Ilyar's people had never considered. "Your species thinks differently than mine," Ilyar had observed when the humans first proposed the shield concept. "We sought to destroy the void. You seek to contain it." Now, as the void approached, that difference might prove crucial. "All captains to command positions," Colonel Parker ordered through the fleet-wide communication system. "Prepare for engagement in 30 minutes." As the crew took their stations, James felt a strange calm settle over him. The fate of not just humanity, but all life in the solar system rested on what happened in the next few hours. "Ilyar," James said quietly, "if this doesn't work—" "It will work," the architect interrupted, his skin pulsing with determined blues and purples. My people built these ships to save life. Your people have given them new purpose. Together, we are stronger than alone. The final minutes ticked away as the void entered the outer solar system. On the displays, Pluto's faint light vanished as darkness engulfed it. Primary weapons charged to 80%, Kate reported from her ship. 90, 100%. All ships report ready. Shield network initializing. Thomas added. Field generators online. James took his position at the central command station. On my mark, engage primary sequence. The bridge fell silent as all eyes fixed on the approaching darkness. James thought of all that had happened since that first discovery. Humanity learning it was not alone, finding its place in a larger struggle, and now standing as the last defense against cosmic extinction. Mark, James commanded. 46 planet-sized ships fired simultaneously. Beams of concentrated solar energy lanced from each vessel, converging at the edge of the void. The darkness seemed to recoil, rippling like the surface of a disturbed pond. Shield network activating, Thomas called out. Around the perimeter of the void, shimmering barriers of energy formed, creating a containing sphere. The darkness thrashed against its new prison, tendrils of nothingness testing the barriers. It's working, Kate exclaimed. The shields are holding. For hours, the battle raged as the void fought against its containment. The ships poured continuous energy into both the attack beams and the shield network, their ancient systems pushed beyond their original specifications by human modifications. Then, something unexpected happened. Where the energy beams struck the void, points of light began to appear, stars, somehow restored from the darkness. It's not just a destroyer, James realized, watching the phenomenon spread. It's a transformer. And we're reversing the process. Elior studied the readings, his eyes wide with wonder. In all our fighting, we never saw this. We never understood what we faced. The containment strategy, humanity's unique contribution, had created the conditions for the void not just to be defeated, but transformed. As they watched, the darkness began to dissolve into points of brilliant light, the stolen energy of countless stars returning to the universe. 3 days later, where the void had been, a new nebula glowed, a nursery for future stars. On Earth, celebrations erupted as news of the victory spread. Humanity had faced extinction and emerged not just surviving, but triumphant. In the command center of the horizon, Elior approached James, Kate, Thomas, and Parker. The architects built these ships as our legacy, he said, his voice resonating with emotion. Now they are yours as well. The stars await the children of Earth. James looked out at the newborn nebula shining against the blackness of space. We have much to learn, he said. And much to teach, Elior replied. The galaxy is vaster than either of our species imagined. It needs guardians who understand both creation and preservation. As the fleet of planet ships prepared to explore the stars together, humanity took its first steps as inheritors of the architect's legacy and protectors of life throughout the cosmos. The journey had just begun.